Oh, all right, folks. Welcome another throwback film. This will be my final throwback film of the year. Actually, this will be the end of the year when Vex. We're going to close out with a high note. We needed to have something positive to kind of hang our hat on headed out of 2023, and we went OG. We were supposed to record this like a while ago. Real life always gets in the way, folks. But you know what? This is such a good film. Hopefully, if you haven't ever seen it, you go see it or revisit it because Good and Bad and the Ugly, the Dollar Trilogy, which is Fistful of Dollars, this one, and a few dollars more, are incredible films and groundbreaking in so many ways. And I'm so blessed to be able to have Vex with me. Vex, how are you, lady? What's going on? Thanks for doing this.
No, it's my pleasure. I've been wanting to get back into the Western genre of film for
Mm,
a while. Like, it's a genre of film that I really do enjoy, mainly because my dad is a huge Western fan, so I grew up
awesome.
having it in the background a lot. But I guess, like, I think I watched that Western show Hell on Wheels. I don't know if you checked that
Yep.
out at all.
I watched the first two seasons here recently, and I did a video, at least one video. I may have done two, but yeah, I definitely talked about that a little bit.
I mean, it sucks in the last two seasons, but those first two
That's good.
seasons are beautiful,
Okay, so
beautiful.
yeah, because it derails. There's literally an episode where it derails. Let's talk about that quickly. Quick, before we get to Good, Bad, and the Ugly. There's an episode because you'll be able to tell me if I'm crazy or not. So I'm watching
Yeah.
Hell on Wheels. I enjoy season one. I'm
Mhm.
rolling through season two. It's a little on the slower side. I'm not
Yeah.
enjoying it nearly as much. And
Mhm.
then suddenly there's an episode where the preacher takes people. He's kidnapped people and he's holding people hostage. And in this episode, two positive characters because you're expecting the preacher to have a redemptive arc and to come back
Yes.
to sanity, and you're expecting this other character to have a positive because he's been the only positive voice with the posse people.
Mhm.
No, they both get shot and killed in the episode, and the Swede gets away with his part. And I'm like, okay. I looked up the ratings because I wanted to
Yeah.
see if I was a crazy person because I hated this
Mhm.
episode. I was done. I was done. I didn't want to finish the season.
Mhm.
And I looked at the ratings, and the ratings go off the cliff. The ratings go off the cliff. So they can't go off and kill the only positive elements to a show. Like it was such an indicative problem of what is epidemic now. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Because it was like this was years ago. This episode represents what we're dealing with now, where they can't have good characters, they can't have characters that we're rooting for, and they can't wait to kill them off when they make them. And
Mhm.
that show, yeah. Anyway, you liked the first two seasons though, right?
No, the first no, and I actually agree with you because I rewatched the entire series just back in the spring, and because I watched the first two seasons, and then somewhere around season, I think it was like mid season three when it was on air still, I just kind of
Mm-hmm.
gave up on it because I was like, this doesn't have the same luster those first
Mm-hmm.
two seasons did. But
Yeah.
I agree with you because the preacher, he was the only one that was trying to be kind of the voice of reason. He was super religious. He had this
Yep.
complex background as well where he used to be kind of abusive to his family.
Yep.
He was a substance abuser as well. And the whole point of him coming to Hell on Wheels was I'm going to literally go to the pit of hell and I'm going to save people there, and
Yep.
that will be how I end up redeeming myself for the things I'd done. And then instead, you're right, they just throw him into like, oh, he's a loon.
Yeah, but he
Let's
was an
just throw
Indian
him there
activist. So at this point in the story, he's like the only voice of being an Indian activist to be like, listen,
because he had
we
Joseph, right? His
yeah,
adoptive
we
son.
know
Yeah.
what you're saying, but you're just going to be murdering these people. Like, there's no, like, why are you doing this? Like, why do you want to basically always put yourself in war, in like,
Mhm.
in massive? And it was like everyone around him was always like going right back to this situation. So finally, he just kind of snaps, right?
Yeah.
And he becomes like, he's taking people hostage. And I'm like, what is happening to the only character that
It
we're,
didn't make any sense, and then they tried to substitute his daughter Ruth in for it,
oh, yeah, it was
but it
awful.
never fully worked the same way because and this was a problem that the rest of the series had, is it kept trying to make all of the females romantic, and then it defaulted Cullen Bohannon, the protagonist, it defaulted him into just being a ladies' man,
Hmm.
in the like, honestly, like, season 6 is just I
Oh
can't
my God, you
believe
know,
that.
it went that long. Oh, there's no way that was
Yeah,
going on. All right.
it went that long,
Oh,
but, like, I can't believe we went from how things were because I thought, was Lily Bell, that was a
yeah,
good way to introduce the romance aspect, but at the
yeah.
same time, both characters were individual. They weren't dependent on each other.
And it was
And
a slow romantic process, right? This wasn't like they just
exactly.
jumped in the sack with one another or whatever. And that works really well for their arcs because to do what you're saying, it is turning every character into a slut is just not interesting. I'm really
It's
sorry, Hollywood. I'm sorry you guys think that's how we all. Anyway, let's get back to the good stuff. Good, bad, and the ugly. Um, your dad was into this. What is your first sort of like memory or exposure to Good, Bad, and the Ugly? Do you have sort of like vivid thoughts of when you kind of when it cemented itself as being one of the greats?
I can remember like just some of the shootouts.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've kind of some early childhood memories of seeing that on the screen, but then I watched the movie because I hadn't seen it in full until like high school when I started really, we'll say I was a budding cinephile then.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided, oh, this is considered one of the greats, so let me just watch this movie in full finally. Um, really enjoyed it. I ended up watching the rest of the trilogy and some others like Unforgiven, for example, because that was
Mm-hmm.
a 92 also with
Mm-hmm.
Eastwood, right?
Yep.
So
The Oscar film.
I'd right, and I'd explored some of the genres of that, and then I guess yeah, I went to university. There we go, and then all film interest just took a permanent pause because I didn't have time to just sit down and watch a film and then get lost in forums talking about films. So I've wanted to get reacquainted with the genre for some time, but I'm also one of those people where I can't just throw something on. I need to be in the mood for it. Otherwise, I just won't enjoy it. So I'm glad that I threw this recommendation out there because it finally gave me the push I needed to kind of get reacquainted with the genre. So I haven't seen this movie in almost 15 years, I'd say.
Wow. Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Great.
So watching it now, kind of with now I'm my
Mm-hmm.
own adult and everything, and given what's been happening with cinema in recent years, it's like s- I was so it's great.
It is. It is so good. And I did this whole say pretty similar situation for me started like in 2018 or 19. I don't remember when it started. I think it was the end of the year. So I kind of rolled into the subsequent year where it's like a whole Easter Western thing. So I
Mhm.
rewatched all of these and obviously Unforgiven and Tombstone and then of course some of the John Wayne movies, things like that. And then earlier this year and through the course of time, I've done a lot of westerns. We did a talk hard on Tombstone. We did some time with Jedi Bill and Deleted Scenes, who do westerns weekly. They do regular westerns, things like that. Um, but for this film, I think the biggest take home I need everybody to know, if you first of all, if you've never watched it, understand where westerns were in film history at this time, right? So this is a foreign film. This is an Italian film, right?
Mhm.
So spaghetti westerns were not well thought of. They were thought of as like the cheap version of what a western was. The Hollywood western had like Bernstein music, so it's very orchestra.
Mhm.
All of the actors are clean and handsome. They have pressed suits and clean guns and fist fights and stuff. But in the end, everyone's going to work out, and so is going to go home, and the
Yeah.
bad guys are mustache twirling cliches and things like that. And now there are exceptions to the rules. Like I'm going to give a lot of love for like The Searchers or Rio Bravo, but
Mhm.
for the most part, there's kind of a stereotype and a trope. And I'll never forget when I saw the dollar movies, my biggest thing was how dirty and real and gritty it felt. And I know this
Mhm.
is kind of a stretch for some of you, but it's exactly why Star Wars worked for me. That ship, when I see the Millennium Falcon, it's all dirty, it's all scratched up. It's been through some stuff. This world has been lived in. That's how the dollar movies feel, and that's why, to me, why they work so well. It's sort of a other side of the coin to the Hollywood ones, which feel very manufactured, or at least
Yes.
very postcard, if you will, Americana.
Manicured cinema, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas this is gritty and awkward and dirty and messy, and it feels more like real life.
I'm in full agreement there. Yeah, because even I think these days a lot of the shots that are in Good, Bad, and the Ugly, I think a lot of filmmakers just, oh, what's the point of that? Why would you show that? But like for instance, when Tuco gets his revenge on Blondie finally, he makes him walk across the desert, right? And
Hmm.
it's a very long, it's a almost 10-minute interlude of them kind of getting through the desert and Blondie finally, he's starting to die of thirst. His skin is getting all blistered without the hat on. And I'm just like, this feels real because otherwise a film would just it would be a quick montage of maybe 15 seconds at most. and it never really feels that they're in a desert. It never really feels that there's a struggle for either character, right? Um, Even, yeah, just like some of these like in between shots through the towns, like outside of Hell on Wheels recently. I'm a huge fan of the Red Dead Redemption series, so it was just a series of Western inspired video games, right? So the first game, especially, like watching this over now after having played that game, I was like, wow, they took so much inspiration from just
Hmm.
this film alone. I was like, I kind of recognize this background. I could recognize there were literally a few sets. And I was like, I've seen them recreate this in the game because that's how influential this was for the genre overall, right?
Yes.
I think this was one of the main films too that also kind of shot Clint Eastwood up to like serious fame as well, because he wasn't considered as serious or big of a star until he
He was a
did.
TV star. So,
There we go.
if you've ever seen anyone seen Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the
Mhm.
character that Leonardo DiCaprio is playing is sort of an amalgam of the Steve McQueen slash Clint Eastwood TV stars. They'd found some success. They were a household name, surely,
Mhm.
but they hadn't broken in. They hadn't gotten it. They were already kind of they kind of flip a little of this around in the Tarantino film. But for Eastwood, he goes and does. This was a huge risk for him. It was definitely. Actually, to be honest, I don't know that it's really that big of a risk. It's almost like a lottery ticket. Like if it would have struck out, you would have struck out. I don't know, he would have been typecast. He was still a rawhide guy. Still could have done
Yeah.
cowboy movies, but it made 5 times the amount of money um, when they brought it into America and it adapted. And again, it just connected because and it had to have been such a shock to see such a um, artsy, gritty approach to this genre at the time.
Mhm.
Like it's like you said, he takes so much time setting things up. Oh, and dialogue, the lack of dialogue. Just watch some of these scenes. There's just silence. It's just them looking and responding, and it creates so much tension and anxiety. Whereas when we watch modern things and all they do is talky, 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 talk, I'm like, oh my
They have
god,
to
get on
explain
with.
everything instead of showing everything to you,
Yeah,
right? Like there's only one heavy instance of dialogue in this entire film, and it's when they finally meet up with the Confederate soldiers
it's
in
way down
almost like
here.
the yeah, around here where there's actually some like serious dialogue happening. But other than that,
Yeah.
it's like Clint Eastwood himself, I would say he only says maybe like 100 words at most throughout this almost 2.5 hour film. Like Tuco does most of the speaking, the ugly.
Yeah, that's
Um,
the ugly on the left there, folks, for
right.
Tuco. And
And
Tuco, well, first off, Tuco gives us everything we need, right? So
yes.
he gives us some humor, he gives us some crazy. You get a little bit of everything you need with the different characters and the performances, and I mean, Eli Wallach is just amazing. Like
Mhm.
it's just an incredible role, and of course, Lee Van Cleef was born to be the bad. Like
Mhm.
it's so great.
Beautiful
Um,
villain, yes.
yeah, it's just so good. Um, yeah, the film is actually almost 3 hours long, which is pretty long by standards at that time.
Hmm.
But what was interesting is that I don't think a lot of folks knew what to expect and what they thought the film would be. And in hindsight, as we go back and we analyze and research and we sort of see this, we really do start to grow a film appreciation of what is accomplished.
Hmm.
I actually, to be honest, I just thought the idea of having our main character, this is like Raiders of the Lost. Raiders of the Lost Ark gets credit for that sort of like the hero overcomes story arc kind of thing. But I'm
Yep.
like, I think it's really rooted here because when I watch this and the fact that he gets beat up and he's drug around in different scenes, and this happens in the other dollar films as well. But
Mhm.
I'm just always struck by that of how real all that felt. Yeah, it's something interesting.
Mhm.
Um, let's talk a little bit about. Um, I mean, first off, the the different styles of shots. It's nowhere as Tarantino's favorite movie because it's like every it's almost everything is unorthodox. If you
Mhm.
you know if you're watching Hollywood John Ford movies, it's like two people standing, four people, little here, little, and there are some genius.
Mhm.
I admit you make that many movies and they're like yes there is some genius to it. This film was like I don't want to do any of that. And I don't know about trivia 100%. Guys will fact check me, I'm sure, but I'm pretty sure um, when Sergio Leone was filming this, a lot of this is on the fly. A lot of this is in his head. He didn't have a lot of storyboarding and planning, and a lot of this is like, let me just get this shot. Let me try this shot. And at the end of the day, this is a masterpiece of vision by that. And we talk about that, right? We talk about
Mhm.
sometimes the best films were passion projects and things
Yeah.
like that. It's kind of exciting to hear that about these films, isn't it?
I agree. I noticed some of the variations in shots too, which is something I wouldn't have noticed like when I saw this 15 years ago, right? But like I noticed that whenever there's specific intents that he's trying to get, so this interaction, for instance, between Angel Eyes and this, I can't remember what the farmer's name is, right? But the intent is it's supposed to build tension and make it feel like this farmer, he's gonna die any second now because he's Angel Eyes is gonna get what he wants and it doesn't matter at what cost, right? So there's like a very there's a villainous angle that he's trying to get through with just the way that, and it's straight on. Like all of these shots throughout this entire conversation are straight on. It's not from an angle, it's not from the side. I can see exactly what a person looking at this killer's face would be seeing, right? But then it transitions in some scenes later on in the film where, like for instance, where uh hold on, I'm trying to think. This one was face on, but then when we get introduced to, oh, all the conversations, like for instance, between Blondie and Tuco, they're all shot at like a third person almost. Like they're not always directly on because you're meant to get an all encompassing feel with the, because they're very dependent on each other, right? Their
Mm-hmm.
livelihood is dependent on the other, whether or not, that's why they keep trying to double cross each other, but it never works out because like they're always meant to be together. So most of the shots with them take a third person feel. But then there's also another shot later on where I think it was Blondie, where the camera pans, like it slowly pans into him as he's getting his gun ready, and it's the only shot throughout the entire film that uses that style, which I thought was very interesting. Because even for films of that era, you don't see it done as smoothly. So I was quite taken by it. Felt a little bit modern.
Well, in
um,
this the shots like this where you get this, I'm going to shoot this from inside the window and stuff. I
mhm,
mean, the Hollywood people would have thought you are out of your freaking mind. Like they
yeah.
don't. Why are you wasting all this space on the side of the screen? Like what? We don't do that. We're showing the mountain. Like what are you doing? Like people don't want to
Mhm,
see the building. They want to see the mountain. Like so everything about this is like art school um, innovation. Like
mhm,
it's just like a different way of thinking and telling a story and taking a visual cues to take the audience on that journey. It's
mhm.
just incredible. I wanted to get to some of the other elements. I mean, obviously, look at just how raw and gritty everything feels on location. Um,
It
you
really
know,
feels like you're in a western. It
yeah, I
really
feel like I'm
does.
there. I
Like,
really feel immersed in their world.
yeah, nothing feel like even just like the costumes. Like I kept stopping, just like these are props. These are supposed to be costumes.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
I like this feels so real. Like there's not even this scene where he sees all the guns out and then he's like, okay, I'm gonna take this one and this one. This and put. I'm just like I. It's normally when you see something like similarly done in film, it's like you can understand that the actor or the scene, it was put together in such a way that it's meant to feel like it's from a script. But I was just like, this comes across as just like so natural, like something I would really see someone do in like a shop out here, try to like piece together like parts of a Lego set or something like that.
Mm.
Um, and then I was also thinking this old guy was probably alive during the Western era. Given
There's some good
when this was
stuff.
filmed.
There's some good
Yeah.
stuff. The other thing that he did, he went and found people who have very distinct looks, and
Yeah.
they're not the typical handsome movie star. They all have some different. Some of the characters have very strange or different features and things like that. Obviously, Tuco is played up a lot, but and obviously Van Cleef, but when you get amongst a lot of the other extras and characters and things like, they all have a lot of very different features and different looks about them and things like that.
Real people. Yeah.
Yeah, and he had a very. I mean, first off, I don't even know. And again, people in trivia. We're not doing this film justice. We could probably, and I think I told this to Vex. There's no way to really do this film justice like this.
No.
We need to have like a playlist where we go back and we do like maybe different segments of the film and things like that. But just
Mhm.
the dive deep into who designed. Okay, this is the hat. This is the poncho. This is the rolled cigarette. This is the look, the feel, everything. Because it's become so iconic. Like this is what
Yeah.
Marty McFly wears in Back to the Future for a reason, right? It's like it's
Mhm.
all part of the gag, part of the inspiration. It's things like that. So,
Mhm.
yeah, just beautiful, beautiful stuff, folks. If you've never sat through this film, it's really if you're a student of any film at all and you have never gotten to watch these, I don't want to tell you that you're going to have such a great time. You're
Oh
just going to be
yeah.
immersed in a world that's just going to make you want to watch the other two films. Before we get to the final scene or the
Mhm.
final sequence, if you will, what about the music? Now, you're a lot younger than me, so I grew up with the cliches. Before I even knew it, people would make reference to the music and
Mhm.
things like that. So, what is it for you, or like, how did that strike you? Uh,
Well, I watched this cuddling with both of my cats, and every time the
mm,
theme song played, they just like
what is happening?
immediately they perked up, right? um like I've heard iterations of this theme, like The Simpsons has done it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure Family Guy has done it at one point. Even Red Dead Redemption, the music in the first game especially is takes a lot of inspiration from this one. Even some of the sound. There's other little. The main character is literally modeled after Blondie. Like you put them side by side, they look almost the same person. So I had no problem with it. It felt very authentic. It felt very Western. It was just fun. Like every time it started to play, I was just like, was something good is gonna happen, because he's very they're very careful with when they choose to introduce the theme music, right? So it
Mm-hmm.
plays right before this, and I remember all the different. It starts just like it. The camera does a couple things actually during this scene. Like it tries to focus on him, then Angel Eyes comes in. And then you see there's a quick zoom in and it shows all of their faces. Then it goes in further and it shows their eyes. Then it shows them walking apart right here. Yeah. It shows them walking apart, spreading out in this circle of stone in the middle of a graveyard. And then finally he cuts, like he does a really fast cut of all their faces, and then the shootout happens. And the tension building. Oh, by the way, does he not have a finger in real life? The actor that plays Angel Eyes?
Oh, Van Cleef.
Yeah,
I don't
because
know. Is he
there's
missing
a very when you see him reach for his pistol, you can see that he's missing a node on his middle finger.
missing a fingertip? Yeah.
Yeah,
Huh.
which I thought
Interesting.
was, if that's a real thing, if it was prosthetic, the makeup was pretty good in here as well, like the skin peeling and blistering and all that stuff. But I this final sequence was so like
He lost the joint on the middle finger of his right hand while building a playhouse for his daughter.
oh
Wow. So
oh
there you go. Yes, he is missing a finger. Mm-hmm.
that explains it. Yeah, but this yeah, as soon as they hit the graveyard, I think even just like tone wise, there's a lot of like there's a shift as well, because now suddenly every character faces the chance of death, but now it's like you're just surrounded by death. So not everyone is going to be walking out of this graveyard alive, kind of deal, right? I thought it was like pretty funny that when Angel Eyes dies, like he falls right into an open grave. I thought that was kind of funny. Even what he does with Tuco at the end, having him stand on top of one of the grave markers with the noose and all of that stuff. But this yeah, that horse is like, it starts pooping in the background as well. I did
Mm-hmm.
notice that. Is this a real graveyard, or was this set up for production?
I assume this is a real graveyard. I mean, they would not have had the money to. I mean, they filmed overseas in these locations and things like this. So
Gotcha.
I'm going to assume that's a shooting look. Yeah, here we go. The Sad Hill Cemetery, as it
Mhm.
was in 2016, it is in northern Spain. Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
Yeah, this is just,
Uh,
I've never seen anything like this usually when they make a like a vast grave or anything, it's usually the Arlington Cemetery is the one that I've
Hmm.
seen a lot, or they just they do it with digital effects. They make it look a lot bigger.
By bigger
But
than it is. Yeah.
right, in real film, I've never seen a graveyard this big, which was pretty. Again, it sets the tone so well for this final arc of the movie. Um, oh, I
Oh, I
go
wanted to
ahead.
go back and say if I was
Mhm.
casting a film, pretty much any film, and an
Mhm.
actor like Lee Van Cleef shows up with that intimidating look in his eyes and he's missing a digit, he's automatically getting a role in my film. I don't know
There you
what
go.
that role will be. I will rewrite a character if I need to highlight the fact that I've got some crazy-eyed person who's missing a digit. He's not to be trifled with. That's all it is. It's like, yeah, yeah.
Oh gosh, this
Because
and I was
I've always wondered
no.
why Harrison Ford's roles don't have more use of the fact that he has that massive scar on his chin. Like only Indiana Jones mentions the scar. Like no one else has the guts to figure out a fun
Oh
story on why you get
yeah.
the. Yeah, it's like you guys are a bunch of pansy. That'd be the first thing I would do with Harrison's characters. I'd make sure I figured out some crazy story or like Air Force One, there'd be all these like jokes about the scar on his face. Like they'd have a new guy who's on Air Force One, like, yo, don't ask the president about his scar. Don't ask his president about the scar. Next thing you know, later on in the movie, there's a comment with the scar, and it's something silly or stupid that he did to himself. It
That's a good
seems so interesting
point.
that that's a reflection of who we are as people, and yet very rarely it's ever brought into the story.
Especially like Jason Momoa, Aquaman, he's got
Hmm.
the eyebrow, and that's from a bar fight in real life. But it's just like
Yeah,
he's Aquaman, he fights bad guys. You couldn't figure out an interesting way to just work that into the script.
yeah.
You have a very good point. Yeah. I'm ready
Oh,
to
so
watch
good.
the rest of the trilogy, in all honesty. After I finished, I was like, "Oh, I don't have time to just sit down because I had a bunch of other things I wanted to do before I sat down with you." And I literally started a 30-day trial to Super Channel because they have all the westerns. I was like, "It's happening." So I'm just gonna go on a western binge as soon as we're done here because I'm
So
ready
good.
to
I
rewatch the
listen.
whole trilogy.
I, but you've seen Tombstone. You've seen Unforgiven, correct?
Yes, yes, but again,
Okay.
these are all I've watched these years ago, so
Okay.
now
All right.
after rewatching this, I'm motivated to revisit the genre and rewatch all these films.
So you have to get me a date and time. We'll record, and we'll have to have the conversation, or at least again, this is the ongoing Western playlist. So the
Okay.
conversation is this. They're the trifecta for me.
Mhm,
Um, Good, Bad, and the Ugly, Unforgiven, Tombstone.
mhm.
They're all three at the top of the. I don't know how to choose one over the other, and it's
Okay.
because they all represent something different in the genre. And then I have the Searchers right there, and I'm just not as massively a fan of the clean, buttoned up westerns of John
Mhm,
Wayne and John Ford.
mhm,
But it is a superb film. I love the film. I'm not trying to bash Searchers at all. It's just a different. It's almost like a different sub piece to these three films. And
mhm.
the reason Tombstone is there, and I know Loki, that's Loki's Stone Loki's my co-host on Talk Hard. That's his favorite because it's so rewatchable. Can't
Mhm.
argue with that factor. I just can't make it part of how we should evaluate movies and then try to not give it bonus points for being so freaking amazingly rewatchable.
Yeah.
So be anxious to see how you're feeling on that. So any final thoughts on the old good, bad, and the ugly there for folks?
Watch it.
Yeah,
That's and, like, I say that as a woman will say, because women typically don't like Western films. I
it's
know
true.
my mom cannot stand these because again, she's had to listen to my dad, watch them, like, for what, 40 odd years of marriage, so I can understand for her, but, um, just it's even if you don't like, notice maybe the more, like, artsy stuff of the film, I think you can just appreciate the realism it brings, and that every actor, whether it's a small, like very minute role, or it's one of the main characters, you feel like they are the character. Like from there's never a moment when I was watching this where I didn't feel like I was immersed. If we compare it to The Grinch, which we reviewed in this same recording session, right? It's like there were several instances where I felt the immersion break, and I guess that also affected why I didn't like the film at the end.
Mm,
But
right.
I there's something really special to be said, especially in like in the day and age we are now with films, when you can watch something and you just nothing else is in your mind. Like you're so into the world that they're trying to show you, the tale that they're trying to tell, the characters that they're trying to build. So, yeah, it's I think the version that I watched though, it might have had some re-voiceover work, because I noticed for a couple scenes, and it wasn't just for one character, it was for several characters, the mouth did not match up to the sound quite as
Oh,
well.
okay. Yeah, there's so
So
many edits and variations to this
yeah.
over the years. Anyway, we will come back and visit westerns again with Vex. It's so great to be able to have someone else who appreciates the genre and the experiment of that. So we'll do that. We'll have that slated for you guys. So, but yeah, folks, if you haven't watched them, have you watched it? Do you have a preference between the $3 movies or the other two, or where does this rank with films like Unforgiven and Tombstone or John Ford films and things like that? So, a lot of good stuff out there. It's a genre. It's a genre that's sort of like kind of set to the side in a lot of ways too. We could also talk about other TV shows, kind of like Hell on Wheels, but like Deadwood, for instance, is the one that
Mhm.
comes to mind, where it's just a great immersive experience
I haven't
as
watched
well.
that yet, but someone else has been dying to
Yeah,
get me to watch it, so I've got season 1 ready to watch as
yeah,
soon
that's
as my
another
Christmas
one.
break starts.
You will not want to stop that one. So make sure you've got a good. You're going to want to binge. It's going to be rough for you to want to stop because there's some characters that you're just like, yeah, you're rooting for really good characters. It's really
Okay.
fun. It's well
Alright.
done. A very well done show. So, well, folks, thanks so much. Everything is in the description for this lady. Make sure you connect to her, see the cool stuff she's doing, and yes. Well, by now we probably have a Vex Pops playlist. We'll have a Vex list or something. It seems like the right thing to do. It really does. It seems
The
like the right
Vox
things to do.
list, there you go.
I don't know. I like the Vex list. I think
Okay.
it just fits because it's all about you, Vex. It's all about you. I'm just the monkey just hosting the show. It's all about you, folks. Take care. Be blessed. Have a good holiday, and we'll talk soon. Take care, everybody. I am.